Hi, and welcome to episode 10 of CultureWatch Radio. I'm Andrew Smith, and with me, as always, is Bill Muhlenberg. Bill, as we celebrate our 10th episode, it's worth noting that you deal with so much more than just the social and moral issues of the day. You've got plenty on your site, including biblical and theological issues. You've even got one section called Difficult Bible Passages. What's that all about?
Yes, well, the Bible is a terrific book full of terrific truths, but sometimes there are bits and pieces that can be a bit difficult to understand, so we already have plenty of good Bible study tools and commentaries to help for these purposes, but I've started to just take some of these more difficult passages, offer a bit of background, historical, cultural, theological, just to help get a better understanding of some of these more difficult texts. And sometimes they're not even so much difficult as perhaps easily misused and abused.
In fact, in your very first article in this section, it's to do with Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, and that's the one that effectively says, "Do not judge." Or did it actually say that?
Well, yes, this is one of those passages I find even a lot of non-Christians seem to know about for some reason. They may know nothing else about what's in the Bible, but they're quite happy to fling this one around. Thou shalt not judge. It sounds handy in today's politically correct culture of, not judging anybody, tolerating everything. But as I explain in the piece, it's certainly not quite what Jesus had in mind. In fact, if you look at the first couple of verses in that chapter 7, it's quite clear what Jesus is aiming for. He's talking about those who judge others hypocritically. That is, he talked about why deal with the splinter in the other guy's eye if you haven't pulled out the log in your own eye. The idea being simply if you're doing the very same thing you condemn in somebody else, well, that's simply hypocrisy. He certainly wasn't telling us not to judge, because he goes on later in that very same chapter telling us to judge. He says you have to judge false teachers. He says you'll judge them or know them by their fruits. So we have to be fruit inspectors. We have to judge the quality of what a person says, what he does. So judging is certainly a part and parcel of the Christian life. So the idea that Jesus is commanding us never to judge is simply a misapplication or misuse of this passage.
So it's quite the opposite of what gets blithely bandied about. It's that Christians are in fact meant to judge and to make the decisions.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, there's hundreds of passages throughout the Bible commanding us to do that very thing. We're told to test all things. We're told to discern. We're told to evaluate. We have to make moral pronouncements. We have to check out doctrine. The Bereans in the book of Acts were told that they were a more noble bunch than the other guys because they daily checked out in the Word of God what the Apostle Paul was teaching them. So that's called judging. It's simply evaluating, assessing, having a critical eye over what's coming your way and, learning to discern what is true and false, right and wrong. Now, of course, as you say, our culture today is in such a hyper-tolerant state that we're never supposed to judge anything. Well, that's certainly not the biblical view by any means.
In fact, you could say this is as politically incorrect as it's going to get, right against the grain of today's culture.
Absolutely, and that's why this passage is so happily brought up by not only our obvious critics and many atheists, but sadly some not very biblically literate Christians. They should know better. Of course we're to judge. We are told in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 that Paul says, don't you know we're going to even one day judge the angels? How can you not be judging one another now in some of the serious matters that were going on in the church? So it's quite mind-boggling that the world, we'd expect it to run with this kind of PC baloney, but when Christians follow suit, that's a real worry indeed.
So it really is high time that we learnt to discern and to apply that.
Well, absolutely. Again, the Christian life is a life of discernment. And it shouldn't be that hard to understand. We do this every day, whether you're a Christian or not. You discern in the morning, right? What color socks you're going to wear, what you're going to have for breakfast, whether you have the second cup of coffee in the morning. These are all things we do. We discern, we assess, we weigh up options, we try to get the best direction in what we're doing. It's the same in the Christian life. We have to affirm what is best from the Word of God and our Christian behavior. We have to weed out or say no to many things, some obviously bad, but others maybe just not the best for our Christian life. So the Christian life is always about discerning, assessing, evaluating, and yes, that nasty J word, judging. That's all part of the Christian lifestyle.
And of course, the more that you've researched and learnt and you come to know, the more that you're able to see what's in front of you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's what we're called to do. Paul says, don't be infants any longer, tossed about by every wind of doctrine. Don't be simply feeding on the milk of the Word. Let's move on to the meat of the Word. Let's go on to solid study of the Word. And it's not just the Word, but it's applying the Word then to the world. How do we take biblical truth and apply it to the issues of the day? So we need to judge and discern in both areas. We need to carefully assess, read, and study the Word of God, and then we carefully take that and apply those points to the world that we find ourselves living in.
And an excellent place to start, of course, shameless plug, is the Culture Watch website.
Absolutely. It's there for this and many other sort of articles, and hopefully it'll help us all on our journey to become more like Christ.
So if you need help with the difficult issues, there's plenty of information and resources available at the Culture Watch website. And we'll see you again next week with another episode of Culture Watch Radio.